Good morning and welcome to Daily Morning Prayer. Today is a beautiful April 15th morning. It's Wednesday, and if you're living in the U.S., it's tax day. And yet we will rejoice and be glad in God. Today, we're going to be looking at an Old Testament reading from the book of Exodus, and we'll be looking at a gospel reading where Jesus declares, "I am the vine and you are the branches." Now, this podcast is different from some morning prayer podcasts. We recognize that morning prayer in particular is an invitation to Christians to explore the scriptures and to find new and deep meanings that they can apply in their personal lives. And so we begin each day by reading first the Old and New Testament lessons together and meditating on those truths that we find. Afterwards, we continue, beginning with our confession and working our way through to the Thanksgiving. Thank you so much for joining us today, and let's begin. This Old Testament lesson is an interesting one. The children of Israel have just crossed over from Egypt through the waters of the Red Sea and into the desert of Shur. But it's not very long before they begin to grumble. Their grumbling is first because the water is not clean and pure. They grumble against Moses and Aaron for that. The water is purified, and then shortly after, they begin to grumble because they are lacking in food. Now, let me remind you that the Jews have left Egypt and they left with only unleavened bread strapped to their backs. And we said that that is an image because God intends for them to leave behind the idolatry and the sin in Egypt. And in the Jewish tradition, leaven is a contaminant, considered to be something that takes what is pure and makes it impure. So now here we are, we're in the desert, and the people find themselves without food. The unleavened bread is gone, and their grumbling begins against Moses again. And I think there's a key thing to recognize here. You see, honestly, if the people have a complaint, the complaint isn't with Moses. The complaint is with God. And yet they have not come to see that the source of their salvation is not an elderly man carrying a staff and his younger brother. The source of their salvation is the God of the universe. And so while they continue to grumble against human forces and leaders, the truth is they have not yet turned their eyes to the God who is their redemption. I want you to please also notice how God resolves this question of food. First, what God provides is an unleavened bread, manna, and he provides that manna on a strictly daily basis because the point here is for the people to come to look to God daily for all of their needs. The only time that will be changed is when they gather an additional day's food in preparation for the Sabbath, a time set apart to remember that God himself calls us to rest in him. I am the vine, and you are the branches. If any man abides in me, he will bear much fruit, but apart from me, you can do nothing. Jesus tells us that when we don't abide in him, We are branches that are already dead. And those are the branches that are cut off and they are reserved for the fire. But when we do abide in Jesus, he comes and he prunes us. He cleans us. He prepares us to bear even more fruit. That's what our call is, to be abundantly fruitful for him. Because in that, his Father, he says, will be honored. So my challenge to you today, first, recognize you have already been cleaned, baptized into the body, raised with Jesus into new life. You're born again and abide in Christ. And the fruit that you bear may not always be visible to those around you. Sometimes our fruit is visible service. Sometimes our fruit is merely abiding, drawing close, being with the Father who invites us into everlasting relationship. One of the most successful films of the 1990s was a film called The Big Lebowski. It starred Jeff Bridges. He was the kind of an anti-hero for the film, and anytime he was asked by somebody during the film how he was, the response was always the same. The dude abides. Well, we are called to be dudes that abide as well. Jesus said, I am the vine and you are the branches. And if anyone abides in me, he will bear much fruit. But apart from me, you can do nothing. For Lebowski, abiding meant being in the moment with the people in the situation in which he was immersed. And I think for us, that's not a bad definition either. Jesus calls us to be in the moment with him. And when we are in the moment, we bear fruit. Now, sometimes we think that the fruit that we bear should be obvious and visible, something that is manifested in ways that those around us clearly see. But I want to encourage you that that's not always the case. Another inspiration to me for many years has been a short book by Brother Lawrence called Practicing the Presence of God. In Practicing the Presence, Brother Lawrence describes his personal journey of growing into relationship with Jesus, being able to abide with Jesus in even the most chaotic situations. And as he abided, what he experienced in his life and what began to flow out into the lives of those around him was a kind of a peace that passed understanding and that created a holiness that would not have been there in any other way. I encourage you today to be a dude that abides.